All right, welcome back. This is the Virtual Residency Workshop 2026. It's Wednesday, June 24th, 2026. Our next session is a Cyber Ambassadors session. Let's talk, communicating that there's a problem. And our speakers are Shelton Carruthers and Dirk Colbury. So take it away, Shelton.
Thank you very much. I'm Shelton Carruthers. I'm a biomedical engineer working for Canon in the medical imaging area. And it's my pleasure to be here with Dirk to talk to you about some of this Cyber Ambassadors content, specifically about communicating and communicating when there's a problem. So first things first, I'd like to give acknowledgments. This content was actually created as part of an NSF research grant. And so we certainly want to thank NSF for the funding for that, but it's also continuing to be supported by Michigan State University and Tau Beta Pi, the Engineering Honor Society, and was the work of Katie and Dirk Colbury and many other content creators. So we want to give our thanks where thanks is due, and again, specifically to thank NSF for the funding. With that, let's go ahead and get started. And since this is an online technique, we want to use what we call the chatter for some interaction. So when I have a question or want to talk with you, the audience, we can use the chat box of the Zoom meeting. And the way this will work is rather than just all of us randomly typing things in, I'll have some prompt or some question. I'll ask you to type your response into your chat window, sending it to everyone, but don't hit the send or click enter yet. Just type your response, and then I'll count down 3, 2, 1, chat. And when I say chat, hit your enter key or click on the send button, and we'll see an explosion of responses, and we can read through them together, you on your screen, me on mine, as those responses come in. So again, we call that chatter, and we hope that it's a good way for you to remain engaged in the presentation. So just to get things kicked off, I'm going to ask you, what is the most interesting place you visited recently? So open your chat window if it's not already open. Type in whether it's the bookstore or a country around the world. What's the most interesting place you've visited recently? I'll give you a moment to type that interesting place. And if there's no place, just give us your hometown. And once you have that typed in, we'll all click send in 3, 2, 1, chat. St. Louis, I love it. I've been there. I lived there for years. Hayward, Wisconsin. Singapore, Sedona is beautiful. Alaska, nice. A restaurant running bingo, exciting. I hope you won something. Utah, lot. So I think everybody got the gist of that. We'll use this once or twice as we go through this session and cover hopefully some of these goals. What we want to do with this presentation is to define effective problem solving and effective communication. Then we'll identify some characteristics of these common types of problems. We'll describe the impact of communication style, and we'll list factors that can influence individual styles. We have some illustrative use of expectations and observations as a means to communicating and to avoid conflict and argument. And finally, we'll reflect on what we've learned and think about where we can apply those. So by the end of today, we'll have covered all of those things. So let's start with defining effective problem solving. Excuse me. So the first question, of course, is, well, how do we define a problem? There are actually multiple different definitions of the word problem. Those who are maybe still in school or recent to it may think of, oh, it's a math problem, it's a homework problem. Others may think of it as something that's broken or not working. Car won't start. It's a problem. Many of us may think that bugs in a computer program or algorithm is a problem. Not having enough time, money, resources, etc., is a problem. So for today's context, Um, Let me ask you, how would you define what is a problem? Whether it's work related or otherwise, how do you think you would define the word problem? So in your chat, go ahead and type your answer, and then three, two, one, send. So any situation requiring a resolution, hurdle or obstacle, great. Something that stands in the way, so blocking you getting somewhere. Anything between you and completing your goal, yeah. Something that hinders progress, something that requires a resolution. Exactly. So again, there are many different types of definitions, but for today's context and what we're talking about is exactly what you guys have already said. And I apologize for saying you guys, you guys and gals. Again, it's a problem that needs to be solved. It's an obstacle that needs to be removed. And we'll talk about how you can do that effectively as opposed to just any way of moving it. So we define a problem again as something between you and the goal. And I think with FIFA World Cup going on right now, this is an excellent example. So our goal may be to get the soccer ball into the actual goal. And the problem is that goalie who's standing between us, or some other player, right? It's the barrier. Maybe it's the huge field. But the barrier is the problem. The goalie is the problem. So, how do we define a solution? Well, as you've already said in the chat, the solution is to remove that barrier or to remove that obstacle so that we can reach our goal, literally. But there's a challenge here, right? So, I'm not a soccer player, so I don't even know how many other people on the field with me, maybe 10. I could just ask, hey, go tackle that guy, hold him on the ground, I'll kick the ball in the goal. Well, that removes the obstacle, right? But that's not an effective solution because we've broken some rules. We might get a yellow or red card. We definitely would. And so there's we can talk about reaching some goal by removing the barrier or removing the obstacle. But what we really mean is that we want an effective and legal solution. So how do we define an effective solution? It solves the problem by removing the barriers. It finds the solutions and we implement the plan. But we also maintain the relationship. We work within the boundaries, we work within the rules, we build teamwork, we strengthen the connections, and it's a foundation for future successes as well. So, an effective solution is not just removing the obstacle to solve the problem, but it's also about maintaining the relationship. And especially when we're talking about interpersonal problems, it's the relationship between the people. So an effective solution is both this and that. So what are some of the types of problems that might come up in our day-to-day work lives or beyond? So we can think about any variety of scenarios. Let's just pick one simple, practical one. We all work in a factory where this factory assembles widgets, whatever those are. We assemble them, we package them, we send them out. And I'm the manager, and I come into the night shift team, and I say, we're going to make more widgets, and we're going to do them faster. So that might be a problem if we're working in this type of factory situation, even though it's imaginary, and the manager comes into the night crew and says, "We want more widgets and make them faster," what are some potential problems that could arise, and or what are the causes of potential problems? So let's do this as a chatter. Again, I want you to make more widgets faster. What are some possible problems that could arise, or some causes that might potentially create problems? So I'll give you a second to type in your idea of some of the problems, and we'll post them in three, two, one, chat. Not enough resources, safety. Yeah, you risk losing the safety, more mistakes, cutting corners, quality, no motivation. That's a great one. Lack of personnel, not enough physical space. The assembly line is full and doesn't move faster. We're putting production on hold to build a different product. Limited resources. Yeah, or just in time supplies. We can't control that, maybe. Injuries. Yeah, exactly. Danger. All these are potential problems. They're not all the same problem, though, are they? So there are different categories of these problems, and probably more that we haven't thought of in this very quick scenario. But in general, we can group problems into basically one of three topics, one of three categories. And maybe there are a few more, but these kind of cover everything. Very generally, there are ability problems, there are motivational problems, and there are interpersonal problems. So think back to what you put into the chat. Where does yours fall within those? Well, let's talk a little bit more about each of these, and you'll have that answer when you get there. So let's start with ability problems. You could reword ability problems as I can't do this. So ability might be lack of resources, lack of knowledge, lack of skill, lack of practice, number of people, the speed of the production system is limited for some other reason. So the ability is I can't do this. Again, lack of resources, lack of knowledge, lack of skill, lack of experience. What do you notice about these? These are all things that can at least be identified and probably even supported. So, how and the obstacle removed. So, what about solving these ability problems? Well, you'll hear me say this over and over and over again for all types of problems is listen and ask questions. What's going on? So identify exactly what is the root cause, what's the source that needs to be fixed. For example, listen closely. Somebody says, I can't do it. You say, well, because you don't have three hands, or because you don't have the equipment, or because you don't have the safety equipment, or because you don't have the materials. Listen to find out what it is. Um, Make sure it's actually an ability problem and not some other problem. As always, avoid assumptions. So as an engineer, it is my nature. As soon as I hear a problem, I start thinking about the solution. And that can be actually quite detrimental at times, where we really shouldn't start jumping to the solutions because we haven't gotten all of the specifications and all the information yet. So it's always good to avoid assumptions, especially about people. Don't assume that when they say they can't do something, it's just because they're lazy. Um, but then once you have all of the right information, work collaboratively with the team or with the other person to identify a solution. What exactly needs to change in order to say I can't do it to I now can do it? So again, with the widget example, if it was lack of sources, well, we need to buy more materials or get our suppliers to bring things faster. If it's we need safety gear, we buy the safety gear. If we need knowledge, then we bring in the expert consultant and we train the workers to do what it is they need to do. If it's education, or textbook knowledge, or if it's just experience, we have in-house training and practice. And if it's something that can't be fixed, well, then we need to figure out, what to do next. Maybe if the hardware actually won't go any faster, maybe we need to upgrade our hardware. Um, so that was I can't do it, ability problems. There's also motivational problems. I don't want to do this. So in our example, I said that it was the night crew, and maybe it was the night crew because, or maybe I'm working on the night crew because I don't want the stress of the day work and I don't want to have to go faster. or maybe I just don't want to work with other people. I don't know. But motivational problems are, I don't want to do this. So what are some reasons for this? Well, it's inconvenient, it's undesirable, it's difficult, it's boring, it's unsafe. Um, there are a lot of different reasons why I'm not motivated to do this problem, this solution. So how do we solve motivational problems? Well, it's a little bit more difficult than the ability. You can't just throw a textbook at it. But again, same as the others, listen carefully. One, identify that it actually is a motivational problem. Two, avoid assumptions. Again, don't assume that they're not motivated just because they're lazy, or any other assumptions. But there are other ways to think about it as well. If there's no motivation, maybe you can add motivation. But there are multiple ways to motivate. For example, one can motivate by natural consequences, or one can motivate by imposed consequences. So a natural consequence is, what's the impact on the task? So, for example, when we make our widgets, the natural, if we are trying to make more widgets and make them faster, if we don't achieve that, then maybe our revenues will drop. If our revenues drop, our profits might drop. If our profits drop, we can't pay all the employees. You might lose a job, or you might not get that raise. Um, Imposed consequences are things like, well, if you don't do this, you won't get your bonus. Or if you don't do this, you can't take vacation. Or if you do this, you can get a bonus, or some other thing. And then there's the third thing is to follow up to ensure that it's the effective solution, that the problem's been solved and you've maintained the relationship, but also to make sure that the motivation is what you think it was. So, for example, we used to have, these all hand meetings where, 200, 300 people are in the room, and somebody who's done a good job, we want to motivate them by giving them, appreciation. So we bring them up in front of the group of people, and lay praise on them in front of 200 of their colleagues. So for someone who's extroverted, that might be a great motivation. It's like, oh, look, I got thanked in front of everybody. Everybody knows I did a good job. For other people who are really introverted, that could be absolute torture. And they, in fact, may be motivated not to do quite as good a job, so they don't have to go up in front of those 250 people again. So again, follow up, make sure that that motivation is what you think it is, and that it's effective. So again, so for our widget, already said it could be that we don't produce enough product, well, our sales go down, etc. Um, Interpersonal problems are probably the most difficult, and you can think about interpersonal problems as, you can't make me do this. You can't make me do this. And this is a little bit more obstinate. Again, it's not because someone's lazy. Maybe it's because there's a personality conflict. Maybe they just hate you. Maybe there have been previous negative experiences. So safety came up before. Maybe somebody had done that before in the same or a different job, was injured, and they're not willing to put themselves at risk like that again. Maybe there's a lack of mutual respect. There are a lot of cases where managers may ask employees to do something that the manager is not willing to do themselves. That's a big place where respect is often lost. And so when you have that lack of mutual respect, it's hard to have motivation beyond the you can't make me do this. And there's also misunderstandings that as simple as the task might not have been well understood, and I don't want to do this as I understood it, but in fact, I was being asked to do something slightly different, and now that I understand that, I'm willing to do that. So again, the interpersonal problems are, you can't make me do this, and can really range quite a bit. and can involve some emotions as well. So solving interpersonal problems is a little bit more difficult. But again, as with all of the others, it starts with listening, listening carefully to know exactly what's going on. It's really important, that especially if strong emotions are showed, like if they, if the employee, if there's a lot of hatred going on here, or resentment, or other things, or if they're just passionate about not doing something, the emotion needs to be acknowledged without judging the person. And not saying, well, you're just a scaredy cat or something silly like that. Always avoid assumptions and don't jump to conclusions with this, as with all of the other problem solving. And you need to consider both sides. So if you're the manager and the employee, or especially multiple employees are saying you can't make us do that, maybe the problem actually is in the request, and the request could be worded a little bit differently, or gone a slightly different angle, or maybe it's just that there's a misunderstanding in the way it was asked, and you asked about a process rather than a goal, and the workers know that there's a better process to get to that goal in a better way. And we'll talk a little bit more later about paying attention to communication style differences and adjust accordingly. So I mentioned earlier the example between the extrovert and the introvert, and being motivated or not by putting, or being, scared by being put in front of a bunch of people. The communication style differences also. So some people respond to a very authoritarian language and style, and maybe even threats. I'm not suggesting that would be a good one, but and others respond much better to a soft and gentle, more empathetic communication. While still someone else may think an empathetic communication causes them to lose respect in you. So everybody has slight differences. So pay attention to what those differences are and see if they're getting in the way of reaching this problem. And again, work collaboratively to repair the relationship first. And then once the relationship is repaired, then consider solving the problem or restating the problem as you move forward. So we talked about, or I mentioned, the strong emotions, and that's very difficult to actually overcome or work around in the workplace or elsewhere. Um, and as we know, strong feelings can get in the way of our logical thinking. You've probably heard other talks of when you're really angry, or when you're really hurt, or whenever you're in a really strong response, you go into what's called that reptilian brain, or the reptilian response, and you behave more like an alligator than a person, and it's just natural. Those strong feelings get in the way. They create more miscommunications and misunderstandings. We tend not to pay attention to the facts, or we get confused about the facts more easily when we're in this state. And at some point, it becomes that fight or flight reaction where we're in it to win it. And we want to win this argument. We want to prove that we're right, even if we're not right or on the right side. And we just, some people say, dig in our heels and really push that. And this works on both sides of the conflict, of course, right? The manager and the report. And so one has to be aware of one's own falling into this trap, or falling into this state of strong emotions, and overcoming it. So, when we're in that strong situation, when we've dug in our heels, it often causes us not to stop, look at all of the facts, and think about the whole story. We get stuck in this mindset of, well, it's this bad choice or that bad choice. It's like steal food or starve. Um, and in reality, there are other solutions, right? For example, maybe going to a food bank, or asking a friend for help, or asking a grocery store, or other things, or finding a temporary moonlighting job or something. But rather than their steal or starve, there always are multiple options. Some of them are less viable than others. Many of them will require us going against our native feelings or instincts. I know for me, it's very difficult to ask for help, but there are of course multiple ways. So the point is, when you get in this loggerhead between two or multiple people where there's strong emotions, it's better not to get stuck in that reptilian mode, but to step back and think about, well, what are the other options? I see these two, both are not good. What's another option that we could approach? So again, in addressing the strong emotions, I don't know how many of you have experienced this before. Whenever I've been in an argument or a situation and I ask or tell the other person, just calm down, I suspect if you're like me, that never happens, right? I mean, it never works. Tell somebody to calm down, they just get more upset. So you can't control other people. You can only control yourself and your own responses and your own emotions. So the start in these situations where there are strong emotions is to manage your own, is to stay calm, to model the effective coping behaviors like take a deep breath. Don't respond instantly out of reflex, but pause and think about a more calm way to respond. Again, I mentioned acknowledging emotion, acknowledging feelings without judgment. Um, and you can do that partly by asking neutral questions. How are you doing? Is everything okay? As opposed to saying, why aren't you doing your job? Or why aren't you, or why are you pissed off? But the point is, when you ask these open questions, listen very carefully. It's often not the immediate first answer that's the deep answer or the really root cause. So listen carefully and have a conversation and communicate to find out what exactly is going on. And then again, focus on the individual and the individual's needs, um, and repair that. Solving the problem about work can come secondary to that. So once the person has gotten beyond this strong emotional response, or you've gotten beyond your strong emotional response, and you're looking at the bigger options, you're not stuck in that fool's choice. Um, you can worry about the solving the work related problem later. It's take care of the individuals first and build that relationship. So we've talked about what a problem is and what an effective solution is. We've talked about the different types of problems, where those types are the ability, I can't, the motivational, you can't make me, or the interpersonal, you can't make me. Um, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about the impact of communication styles in these solutions. So I want to go back again to our effective problem solving. Again, effective problem solving was not just removing the obstacle, but it was removing the obstacle within the constraints, within the limits, and maintaining that relationship. So why is the effective problem solving so hard is because it relies on effective communication, and effective communications are built on strong relationships. And strong relationships can only happen when there's trust, respect, and effort. And trust, respect, and effort are hard to come by, right? You can't just walk up to somebody and say, trust me. That pretty much demands that they're not going to trust you. But the only way you can get someone's trust is to earn it, to show that you're trustworthy, to demonstrate activities that you're trustworthy, say what you're going to do and do what you're going to say, and then the other person will give you trust. It's a gift. It's not a requirement. And so effective problem solving, again, solving the problem and maintaining the relationship is difficult because it requires all of these things that are built on trust, respect, and effort. So the way that we communicate, whether it's our style, our accent, the speed, etc., is an important factor in whether we're able to communicate effectively, especially with other people. So we form unconscious opinions about people based on their communication styles almost instantly. Um, it's based in accent, culture, pitch of voice, speed, pacing, pausing. So I don't know. Some of you may have heard that I have a slight South USA accent. Um, maybe you have some preconceived notions about that. When I was in graduate school, I had a professor once who was mentoring me. I was practicing a presentation to go to my first big conference. It was on the West Coast. And I said, "Oh, I'm happy to be," I was practicing my presentation. I said, "I'm happy here to talk about my research doing so and so." And back then I had a stronger accent. He stopped me and he said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." He says, "Don't say research. It makes you sound like a bumpkin." And I was offended at the time when he said that. But after all these years, I realized that while it's bad of someone to make that assumption that I speak slowly, I have a heavy Southern accent, and I sound like I might have come out of the movie Deliverance. It's bad of those people to make that assumption about me because of that, but it's also human nature. Other people, for example, speak really, really fast, and that affects their ability to communicate. Growing up, and maybe still to this day, you see it in advertisements, but we Americans think that an English accent means they're just instantly smarter. So there are these biases that we have built in, and we need to understand that about ourselves and also about how we respond to how we hear other people as well. So it's clear that we tend to like people with communication styles similar to our own, and we tend to communicate better with them when they're the same. Um, and so Deborah Tannen said this quote a while back, saying, Many of our motives, so obvious to us, are never perceived by the people we talk to. Many instances of rudeness, stubbornness, inconsiderateness, or refusal to cooperate are really caused by differences in conversational style. So, for example, I may say, "Oh, it would really be nice if you did so and so." And I may think that that's an order to someone who reports to me, but the other person may think, "Oh, yeah, he's thinking about what would be nice, but I'm going to just keep doing my job the way I'm doing it." And so, those types of motives are not necessarily clear, and also styles that when people are used to growing up in a large family where they talk a lot at dinner and everybody's talking at the same time, if those people are interrupted while they're talking, it's just a normal way of communication. But someone who didn't grow up in that communication style, if they're interrupted like that constantly by someone who it's normal, they may think, "Oh, that person is rude. I don't like that person." So again, while it may be very obvious to you and it's your lifestyle, it's not necessarily the same as other people. So keeping those things in mind, let's keep looking forward at doing a little bit of practice. So again, we've talked a little bit about understanding what we mean by effective problem solving, and we've talked about different types of problems. We've learned that problem solving is not always easy. There's often emotion involved in it. It's complicated and it can involve multiple issues. And some issues, especially interpersonal ones, may need to be solved before the problem itself is solved. And we've learned that communication style is an important aspect of that problem solving and can itself be the cause of some misunderstandings and some of the problems to begin with. So let's look a little bit about communication styles and techniques that might help to minimize those problems in the first place. So, what I'm saying here is that we want to start conversations, not arguments. So how do we start a two-way conversation or a multi-way conversation without immediately jumping right into an argument about something? Well, the first thing is to invite conversation by sharing expectations and observations. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, expectations are, what we think, what we wish or assume to be the truth, um, a certain process to be followed, a specific outcome to be reached, a certain, rule to be followed. Those are expectations. Observations, on the other hand, are just that. They're the facts that we observe, what we know to have happened. It's based on actual experience, actual data. It's not what we hope will happen. It's not what we expect to happen next based on what's already happened. It is what has actually happened. So, what's the actual fact of the situation as we stand now? It might be a policeman. I observe you driving 70 miles an hour in a 55 zone. Um, I expected you to be following the rule of 55. Now, it's important to do opposite of what I just did. It's important to communicate expectations first and then observations. And why is that? Well, there's multiple different reasons. One of them is if you've ever had text communications and you sent two or three questions in one text and they only answer back the last question, it's that last thing that was in your text that stayed in their mind. And so that's part of this ordering. But if you start with an observation, like I saw you not working, then that immediately puts the person, it might immediately put the person in a defensive situation. When that person becomes defensive, that's a strong emotion. They stop listening, they get locked in, and we've already set up a potential problem. But if we communicate the expectations first, especially if they're well communicated expectations from the onset, um, we can say, this is what we expected, and then follow with the observation, which either supports or doesn't support that expectation. So it's important to communicate the expectations first. Um, but again, also because it's the observation, it's the behavior that we want to talk about. And so that's what the last thing that they'll hear, that they'll remember. Again, the goal is to create a conversation, a two-way back and forth, not an argument. We don't want to do something to immediately engage in emotional, digging in the heels. So it's easy to argue about expectations. I expected you to finish this by 5 o'clock. Well, you didn't tell me that, so how would I know? I have to leave, to go get my kids, so it's not going to happen. Um, but it's more difficult to argue, or it's almost it's can't shouldn't be able to argue about observations that are based in fact. Fact is, it's 5 o'clock and the product's not done. So we're more inclined to have discussions about the fact and more inclined to argue about expectations. So it's another reason why we state the expectations first and then the observations second, because that's what's going to get discussed. So I want to step back and say, well, you can disagree whether it's on the expectations or maybe I don't want to say it's alternative facts, but maybe you see something from a different point of view as someone else. What if you still disagree? Um, well, we can always work together to communicate either a new point of view or a new phrasing of the objective or the statement or a new understanding of the problem. But the point is, we certainly can continue to communicate, but at some point, you may come to a point where you're not going to see eye to eye on this. So, is it okay to agree to disagree? You hear this often. sometimes it's in comedies. And in fact, it is sometimes okay to agree to disagree under certain situations. Excuse me. Under other situations, it's not. So, for example, um, let's say your specialty is, let's say, O-rings that fit on the engine of a space shuttle. And you're the specialist, and you're saying that if this goes out and sub-freezing temperature, it could fail. Well, we have a real life example where that happened, and that was not a case where it was okay to agree to disagree. So, if it's about factual information that's critical to the success of the solution, then no, it's not okay to agree to disagree. So, a solution has to be found that falls within these, sorry, specifications or parameters. But in other things that aren't really central to the solution, it's perfectly okay to agree to disagree. But when you do, remember the ABCs. So the point is, when you agree to disagree, that really means you have to drop it, right? You don't have to keep either passively aggressively or actually aggressively trying to make the person agree with you. If you've agreed to disagree, then agree and drop it. Um, but you can also follow the ABCs, which is find the points where you do agree and emphasize those. So start together where you are together. From that, then you can build. Maybe it's build from that foundation. Um, excuse me. And then compare. Compare is work together. Those things where you do agree on, kind of build them out in different ways. Explore a little expansive from there, but also compare where you disagree. Tell me more about your point of view. I'll tell you more about my point of view. Maybe that means I'll understand something that I didn't understand before from someone else's point of view, and it will help me change my mind or my understanding. Likewise, if I describe to others, they may get better understanding of the situation and change their mind or change their understanding as well. So you can agree to disagree, but you have to let it go and follow the ABCs. So now it comes time to where we're going to rehearse some activities. Um, but yeah, why don't this is a good time to pause and ask if there are any questions. You can type them in the chat and I or Dirk can help to answer those. So while we wait to hear your questions, or if you're typing them in the chat, I'm going to ask Dirk to share an example that he has of agreeing to disagreeing and following the ABCs.
Hey, thanks, Sheldon. Can everyone hear me, I assume? Um, so yeah, I've worked in supercomputing, high performance computing for a while, and there was a particular person I worked with where it felt like every other sentence we fought on. It was just very frustrating for both of us, and it got really kind of ridiculous. And so at one point I actually was teaching this exact curriculum, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try the ABC technique, and I did it, and it actually worked better than I expected. I met with the person, and I told them that, let's have a conversation. Let's try to figure out how we could best work together, because we're clearly both frustrated with how um, different we are in our approaches to things. And when we started, we agreed, we basically went down to bedrock, and we both agreed that our biggest priority was to get research done on campus and help out our researchers. That is the heart of what we both wanted to do. Now, we wanted to do it in very different ways, but essentially that was the crux. And by establishing that we both agreed on that, it actually made it much easier to work together. Now we still often to this day will butt heads every once in a while because their approach to thing was, in my opinion, to put up more barriers, to make more forms to fill out, make more hurdles to jump through, so that in their view, they would provide the exact correct resources um, to our researchers.
Mhm.
I kept trying to break down barriers, kept trying to be flexible. And it's just a fundamental difference. And once we realized what that difference was, we could build off of that. And we made it easier to know what the other one would expect in a given situation. And yeah, we still butt heads a little bit, but I always liked that because now, even though we disagree often, we both have that bedrock of wanting to help our users, wanting to help our researchers. And that even that little bit builds a trust relationship between us that I think is something that is really nice. So I wanted to share that story. I just
Yeah.
it's important.
It is. Thanks for sharing that. It was good, and it also highlights the earlier point that good communication is built on trust and respect, which you both had for one another, even though your methods were starkly different. Um, yeah, that's right. So, are there any other questions or comments from the attendees?
Quiet group.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. Let's keep moving on, and we'll have some examples where the attendees can read. So what we're going to use is an example sample emails. They're models for the way we might do one-on-one communication live, or actually how we might email, or if you even use old style paper. It's just an example. It's not complete. So these are going to be really short emails that kind of get to the crux and show the overall, XYZ without all the fluff language. So these are not examples of what you should copy exactly. You should copy the style and the process, but not the terseness. Um, but when we talk about communicating, again, we want to do the expectations and observations, which, by the way, is exactly the way. I don't know how many of you are involved in higher education, especially engineering, but I am an evaluator for the ABET, the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology. And they teach us that when we communicate back to the program that we're evaluating, we state the expectations, that is the criteria or requirements, let's say, of the program. Then we state our observations. So the requirement is you must have XYZ. The observation is we saw proof of X and Y, but we didn't see proof of Z. And then we have the consequence. If this is not met, then regulation will fail to be in compliance, and you may lose accreditation. So this is a tried and true method of communicating, of expectations and observations. And again, the email offers the opportunity to draft, review, and revise. So you can, it's much better than verbal because you can type it out before clicking send, you can read it again, and you can rewrite it before sending it. And if you're going to do that, don't fill in the to field until you're actually ready to send it. I learned the hard way that control enter means send. When I was typing a letter and it was nowhere near final version, and I sent it to my boss at the time. So it's safer if you don't fill in that too. And I know when you hit reply or reply all, it's already populated for you. But anyway, the point about email communications, written communications, is you have an opportunity to draft it, to review it, to read it from the point of view of the other person, and then revise it. But again, the mode is clearly state the expectations. What did you expect to happen, or what are the expected process or procedure or specifications? Then clearly describe the observations. So what did you see, hear, read, experience? And when I say hear, I don't mean, oh, Bobby Sue told me this about so and so's cousin who said this. No, we mean directly hearing. Um, it also helps to have details about, last Saturday night I saw you go into the bar with so and so, or whatever the actual observation is, and then who was involved as well. So the who, what, when, why, how, etc. Describe that observation and avoid assumptions. Again, it's not observation is not what you expected to happen based on partial data. It's the actual data itself. Um, so again, the upcoming examples are abbreviated for space and time. They're not the full thing, but they're meant to be the essence of the communication. So I'm gonna ask Dirk to do a little bit of role playing here, and maybe Dirk can read these emails, and then we'll discuss how it could have been better. And you can kind of assume some of the backstory as well. But Dirk, do you want to read these emails as we come across them with emphasis?
Absolutely. Dear Jazz, your jobs are going over resource limits and causing the nodes to go down. You need to stop running them immediately or we'll disable your account. The HPC team.
Almost expected to be signed love, HPC team. Um, so what was wrong here? I mean, clearly this is a type of threat that's trying to motivate this person. But we don't really see a clear statement of what the expectations are, and not a real full description of the observation of what's actually going wrong. We know they're going over resource limits, and causing other problems, but we don't really know the story. So let's look at a different way that we might address this. And again, we'll state the expectations, observations, the natural consequences, and then a follow-up. So a different way to have approached this same case could have been to say, Dear Jazz, the HPC system limits jobs in order to make the resources available to everyone. So this is expectation and background. We notice that your jobs are consistently going over these limits, which causes the nodes to go down. Would you please set up an appointment so that we can talk about your resource needs and try to identify a solution? So here, this is one, it's just a little more friendly, even if it's cut and dry. It states the expectations that everyone has access and not one person can hog or cause problems for other people. We made the observation. We could have said a time or a total number of jobs, but this was sufficient. And then we stated the consequence. And this consequence is the problem that means that everyone else doesn't have access, right? And then the follow up was not stop immediately. It was, we want you to succeed within these boundaries, right? So solve the problem with effective, and talk about your resource needs. So great comment here. I hate it when they sign anonymously instead of signing with the name. It makes it seem like they're hiding behind HPC team and feels impersonal. Um, I agree. Again, these are just short examples. So if we'd signed it Bob, maybe nobody would have known it was coming from the HPC team. But you're right. It's much better to be more personal when communicating directly with Jazz. And some people might have said it needs to be more formal and say, "Dear Doctor, Smith." Um, yeah. So we can, we could, for example, have said John Doe, head of HPC team, or something like that. Great example. Great feedback. Thank you.
Dear Dr. Shao, from now on, please come to me with all questions and comments instead of the IT staff. I realize there is a problem on the system that is impacting your work. My staff is trying their best to fix the problem, and your constant interruptions are distracting them and makes fixing the problem take longer. Rory.
Okay. So what do we have here? So obviously, someone's work's not working. um, the staff are not achieving the right solution apparently, and they're being distracted and not being able to do their own work. So what could have been another approach? Again, let's go through expectations, observations, consequences, and follow up. So the IT department has a ticketing system for our users to submit requests and let us know when there are problems. So we can surmise from this letter over here that probably this person has gone to the help desk multiple times, just walking up, probably restating the problem over and over for multiple people. Um, and and it's not getting fixed, and it's wasting, well, quote unquote, wasting time. Um, Again, so state the expectation. The expectation is we have a ticket system we expect you to use. I understand that you came into the office 3 times last week asking our staff to resolve a problem impacting your work. That's not an accusation. It's not a quit bothering us. It is, this is what happened. So the consequence is I rely on the ticketing system to track problems and assign staff to address them. You could even have said assign appropriate staff, right? Please make sure to submit a ticket when you have an IT concern. If you do not receive a response within 48 hours, feel free to email me directly. So this is the come to me with all questions and comments instead of the IT staff. Much better option here. And I think Dr. Shao probably now feels a little bit more addressed. Yeah. So I want to look at Matt's comment. The reason we do this is because if I'm off work tomorrow and a reply comes in, another team member can address it versus the person waiting for me to get back in a week from vacation and our bosses tell us to sign the same for a sign at least it's yeah. Yeah. Okay. And there's a response. There's a valid reason, in my opinion. We've received some emails from a user asking, yeah, automated via script. Yeah, it's an interesting. So the and automated scripts, I don't know, maybe with LLMs, the scripts can follow the expectation, observation, natural consequences, and follow up better than something like that. Um, yeah, some great examples of some in the chat. Thank you for posting those.
Yeah, I had a comment too. I mean,
Hmm?
we could have a whole session on the validity and usefulness of ticketing systems. I know we have a lot of strong opinions in the group. Uh, Me personally, it's a love-hate relationship. There's some good things and bad things, but yeah, it's an interesting problem when you have, especially when you have a big team. Um, how do you get that personal relationship built and
Hmm.
not feel like a machine is all you're talking to?
Hmm.
Because we need that relationship to help solve the problems. But if that relationship becomes too close, especially to an individual, when you have a whole team working with you, it has a almost opposite problem. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting competition.
Yeah, and again, this letter is not in defense of the ticketing system per se. It is, again, it's the expectation. This is the process that the university has in place. You know, if it needs to be changed, maybe that's part of this conversation. That in the future it can be changed, but as it is today, these are the constraints that we're all held to. That's the expectation. So let's work within those expectations to reach an amenable goal now. And if things need to change, let's talk together about how we might be able to change those things. Yeah. Good comments, all in the comments as well. Okay, here's another one. Let's keep going.
All right. Dear Ali, I am sick and tired of you interrupting me during meetings. My opinion is just as important as yours. Please stop. Chris.
Okay, so now we have Chris and Ali who are co-workers, and Apparently, they have team or group meetings. And maybe this is a little bit like my example earlier, where Ali grew up in a family where people talk and talk over one another and interrupt constantly, and Chris doesn't. Or maybe there's something stronger here. But clearly, there's some emotions going around this with Chris being interrupted and not being able to make a point. So let's look at it if we put the expectations, observations, natural consequences, and follow up. Dear Ollie, or Ali, the ground rules for our weekly meetings include making sure that everyone has a chance to contribute to the conversation. I noticed that you interrupted me twice at the meeting this morning, which meant I wasn't able to fully explain my idea for the project. I'd like to present my idea at our next meeting. Would you please include 10 minutes for me in the agenda? So, again, expectations. Apparently, this group has previously established their working understanding or ground rules of this is the way we're going to behave, and everyone gets a chance to speak, etc. And so those ground rules were repeated. The purpose of the meeting was for all voices to be heard. Um, Instead of the accusatory, you interrupted me 10 times, it was a little one step back. I noticed that you interrupted me. It's not an accusatory or you pissed me off because you interrupted me. It was, I noticed you interrupted me. And immediately going into that consequence of, therefore, I wasn't able to get my point across, and I deserve to make my point as much as you do yours. So I'd like you to schedule 10 minutes in the next. What's implied but not explicitly stated is that Chris will be the only one speaking during those 10 minutes. Dirk, do you want to add any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, this one has a lot of assumptions about how the team operates.
Yes.
It also assumes that Ali is in charge of the agenda. But I think it does a good job of trying to do, you can say you interrupted me. I like the number twice particularly because it gives it, numbers are good to give a concrete uh, observation that is a little bit more data driven and less feeling driven. And
Hmm.
so I kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it wasn't just a one-off. Okay.
All right.
Go for it, Sage.
Dear Alexis, I really like the energy you are bringing to the team. However, I noticed that you have stopped writing weekly reports. We really need them. You also created a wonderful workspace. Keep up the good work. Sage. That's positive.
Okay. And in fact, many may recognize this as the sandwich technique. So, good positive praise, the mean thing or the meat, and then followed by more praise. What are some of the challenges with that? Well, I mentioned earlier, it's like that text, right? You get that text with three questions. It's only the last question that gets paid attention to. So Alexis may say, "Oh, great, I'm doing good work. I'm going to keep doing it as exactly as I'm doing." But that's not the point of the message. The point of the message is the reports are required, and apparently that they have not been being handed in time. So let's look at a better way to do that with the expectations, observations, and consequences with follow-up. So Alexis, each member of our team is expected to submit weekly progress reports. I haven't received your updates for the last 2 weeks, which means I don't know the current status of your projects. Please schedule an appointment within the next 3 days so that we can talk about your progress. Yeah. Yeah, Dirk is supporting my argument in the comments that research has shown over and over that sandwiching feedback doesn't work because it gets buried. And it's more about the feel good than it is about the feedback. So again, expectation, observation. I haven't received your reports for the last 2 weeks. Again, a numbers. It's not just a one-time event, but it's now repeated. and the natural consequence.
One thing I want to point out is that this was worded, I haven't received your updates, instead of saying you haven't sent your report.
Yes. Yeah. That's big, right? Because it could have gone to junk, right? Okay, I thought you were going to say something more.
No, no, I was just, yeah, you said
Yeah,
what I wanted to say. It could
yeah,
have gone to junk, and it's almost always, when you think
yeah,
about your observations,
yeah.
see what assumptions you might be wrapping. If you made your observation you didn't send, that's an
Right.
assumption.
That is. It's not the observation. Yeah. Good point. Thank you. All right, let's do one more.
Dear Harley, you're not spending enough time in the office and therefore not getting enough work done. I need you to either put in the time that is needed or you need to let me know so I can hire a different student to take your place. Quinn.
Okay, this sounds like a student intern who may not be exhibiting their work. So let's look at it again. Expectation, observation, consequences, and follow-up. Dear Harley, as part of orientation, so going back to the baseline and where did this expectation get set? As part of orientation, we explained that interns are expected to be in the office from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a 1 hour lunch break. Okay, this may be dated, but that was the expectation. I've noticed that you haven't been at your desk until after 9:30 this week, and that you were gone by 3 p.m. on Tuesday and Wednesday. Okay, some very specific times, and the fact that it's not a one-time event. Since you weren't at your desk, I wasn't able to talk to you about the draft report you submitted. So that's the consequence. Please come by my office at 8 a.m. tomorrow so that we can talk about what's going on. So all this stuff about hiring a different student and stuff, this was just venting and frustration, and maybe a little bit of threat. I don't know. But this is more to the point, right? The point is, I want to see you in person in the time that we expect, and I want to discuss your draft report. If he shows up at 8 or she shows up at 8 a.m. without the report, well, then that might be a very different discussion than the actual draft report. But again, the assumption that you're not spending enough time and therefore not getting enough work done, that's not an observation. The not being in the office when expected, that's an observation, but the work may be getting done. Okay. Were there any comments on that one, Dirk?
Nope, you did great.
Thanks. Well, we're running up to sort of the end of our time. We do have about 5 minutes left for any questions. But I just wanted to remind us all that what we talked about today was we defined what effective problem solving was. That it was removing the obstacle and maintaining the relationship, and some effective communication and how different types of communication styles can influence the solution of the problems. We've talked about the three different types of problems. We talked about expectation observations to invite conversations as opposed to starting arguments. And what I'd like to ask you now is to go back over in your mind what we did today and think about one or two concepts that really resonated with you. Maybe it is this idea of communicating the expectations, the observations, the consequences, and the follow up, and practice it. Put a note in your phone or write it on a piece of paper and stick it in your pocket so you'll see it in a few days, and practice that again. It's been shown that sitting in this lecture and listening to it, you're not going to take home a lot. if that's the last time you think about it. But if you write down something, give yourself a prompt to practice what it was that stood out during today's presentation, then it'll be more likely to stick with you and help you out in the future. So, with that, I will stop my presentation and ask for any questions or comments that you might have. You can put them in the chat. You can unmute yourself as long as it's not a whole bunch of people unmuting at the same time. And appreciate your attention.
Anyone have any questions?
Bueller. That's an old reference.
That's getting pretty old.
Now that movie's on Netflix still or whatever.
Good to know. Dirk, any final comments?
No, I'm happy. I hope people got something out of it. You did a great job.
Thank you. Well, seeing no questions in the chat and assuming I haven't heard anyone unmute and speak, I don't want to assume that no one has spoken because there could be technical difficulties. But observing that there's no chats or additional questions, then I think we can call it an end. Oh, look, there is one question. It's about my accent. It's from, well, originally it's from Louisiana, but it's not the way it sounded when I lived in Louisiana, which was over 30 years ago. So it's definitely toned down a little bit. I grew up in North Central Louisiana, Ruston, Louisiana, hometown to Louisiana Tech University.
Nice. I think then we pass it back on to Henry.
All
Thank you
right.
for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Shelton and Dirk. And let's give Shelton and Dirk a virtual round of applause here. Look at all the clapping hands. Very nice.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm gonna end the recording here.